Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first in our series of Wednesday professional development workshops for the 2020 Leadership Alliance Summer Program. I'm Dr. Will Whittles. I'm the manager of undergraduate and graduate programs here at the Leadership Alliance. I will be the moderator for today's event. This event is a component of the Leadership Alliance Virtual Professional Development Program. Leadership Alliance partners created this initiative to ensure continuity of skill building, networking, and exposure to graduate programs for students across the country during this time of social distancing. Paired with our Monday evening Conversations with a Doctoral Scholar series, which I think have been phenomenal so far, we hope to provide you with a platform for discussion of critical issues, networking with each other and with our wonderful doctoral scholars, as well as for learning approaches and skills for navigating your research careers. Today's session will focus on that last piece. This series would not be possible without the work of my colleagues at Brown University, Chaminade University in Honolulu, Weill Cornell Medical College, and the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. To those colleagues, thank you for your efforts in creating this program. Today we'll be talking about collaborative learning groups. Studies show that working in groups improves students' performance in class, on tests, and while conducting research. This workshop is an opportunity for exploring the peer learning process and considering how to form a successful study or research group. It will cover the steps to establishing a group and includes tips for troubleshooting those groups when they aren't functioning as well as they could. The workshop and its content would not be possible without the collaborative work of 5 Leadership Alliance institutions: Brown University, Morehouse College, Spelman College, the University of Chicago, and Vanderbilt University, as well as sponsorship from the National Institutes of Health, Institute of General Medicine. I would like to take a moment to thank our partners from those institutions for designing and refining this workshop. We're lucky to have here today 4 workshop facilitators from 3 of those institutions. Dr. Kimberly M. Jackson is chair of the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, associate professor of chemistry, and director of the Food Studies program at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. She serves as co-director of the Links Scholars Program, which is a living and learning community for STEM scholars, an initiative whose goal is to improve access to STEM research careers for women of color through professional and social networks and social justice empowerment. A Fulbright scholar, Dr. Jackson maintains a robust and active research program focused on novel therapeutic agents for advanced prostate cancer and the role of minority-serving institutions and women of color in diversifying the STEM pipeline. Dr. Quidernica Kwan Rie is the NIH-EIP program coordinator at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, where she also teaches an undergraduate nutrition course. Dr. Rie recently earned her PhD in Nutrition and Food Sciences at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and has a BS in Chemistry from Spelman College. Some of you may recognize her as the moderator in the virtual STEM classroom. Kwan is passionate about food and culture and enjoys traveling. And Kwan, I hope this pandemic ends very soon so you can get back to your travel schedule. Dr. Wallace Sharif is an assistant professor in the life sciences at Morehouse College. He has a long-standing interest in the postgraduate outcomes of students in science careers and has worked with several programs, including the Leadership Alliance, to develop students' scientific acumen. Dr. Victoria Flores is the Associate Director of the Office of the Provost at the University of Chicago. Victoria was born and raised in Puerto Rico. She received her BA in Hispanic Studies and Psychology from Brown University and her PhD from the University of Chicago. Her research has focused on social and chemical communication in bats. She is the new director of the Leadership Alliance program at U Chicago. Victoria, we're thrilled to have you.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with all of you to talk a little bit more about collaborative learning. So before we start, you might be wondering what we mean by collaborative learning. So this is really the formation of student groups for the purpose of working together to study and to solve problems. collaborative learning is based on the theory that learning is a social process. So many of you might have realized in your own research experience and working with your mentors that research is very much a social and collaborative process, and it is best to work in teams to answer complicated questions. And so we're thinking of collaborative learning as ways that you can integrate this in smaller groups when thinking about your classroom and other, problem sets and responsibilities that you might have. And so today we're going to discuss different learning activities that you can use to further what you're learning in your classroom and in your courses, not only over the semester, but during your research careers. So you might think about ways that you can integrate this over your summer with your Leadership Alliance peers, or when you get back to your home institutions, when you're thinking about your courses. And I used different collaborative learning techniques even as a grad student. Can we go to the next slide? Awesome. And so really we wanted to just start with introducing collaborative learning. And there is a lot of research that demonstrates that collaborative learning can be used to enhance the learning experiences and outcomes of high achieving students in highly selective college environments. And there are many benefits to using different collaborative learning strategies. It can help you increase your connectedness on campus. You can meet other people in your courses, so people that might have your same research interests. And it's also a great way to highlight some of your strengths, so you can bring some of your own research strengths to this group and learn from your peers on ways that you can improve areas that might be lacking. And collaborative learning can really lead to improved learning experiences and outcomes that can result in increased persistence. So if you are succeeding in your courses, you will do better during your academic trajectory. And this results in higher persistence and higher graduation rates, especially for students of color at highly selective institutions. So today we're going to discuss a few strategies, and to have a conversation, we have several questions as well from some of you, and to have a discussion on what collaborative learning is really about.
Hello everyone, I'm Kimberly Jackson from Spelman College, and we're going to really reinforce these different types of what collaborative learning is. Characteristics of collaborative learning can be team-based. Usually it's 5 to 7 members, although many of my students like working in smaller groups. You meet for a specific course. You may be meeting for your laboratory. You self-manage yourself with different types of tools that you may use to help bring the group together. And you're responsible for collaborating and teaching each other what's happening in the group. We believe that collaborative learning enhances working relationships and socialization among the group members. It also develops your leadership and academic skills. So have you ever participated in a collaborative learning group? I'm sure many of you have. So we're going to do a quick poll. So go ahead and, look at the poll and answer. Thank you for that. If we don't have the results, we'll get them at the end of the session. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about, oh, wow, they're there. Wow. So 83% of you guys have participated in polls. Participating in collaborative learning groups, and only a few of you have not. So that's great. So now we're going to move into why do we feel that studying in collaborative learning groups leads to success? So there was a study that was done some years ago by Dr. Yuri Treisman, who had this theory that students who work together actually became more successful. So in this particular theory, it was a calculus class at the University of Texas in Austin and also at UC Berkeley from an emerging scholars program where they looked at Black and Latino students who worked in these collaborative learning groups. And what they saw that they actually outperformed their minority peers, as well as their white and Asian classmates. So this was just one example of how we feel that students who studied together had greater achievement than students who studied alone. We believe that collaborative learning increases your learning. So for instance, it helps you study in more efficient ways. It improves the quality of your relationships with your peers and also with faculty. And it helps you improve self-efficacy and integration into the environment. I tell my students all the time, it helps you with the art of diplomacy. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to take these skills and go somewhere else with it. And also improves your oral and written communication. We also know that students who've used collaborative learning strategies, and you're going to get more strategies by the end of this seminar, it helps with knowledge acquisition, your self-esteem, critical thinking, and that higher level thinking. And it also exposes you to an increased understanding of diverse perspectives. It also, like I said, prepares you for social and real life situations. So collaborative learning is good. So now we have another flash poll, and another one of my colleagues is going to jump on, but do you learn better by yourself or in peer learning groups? Go ahead and try that poll. Thank you.
So this is good because I think this leads into the next segment, which is if you are interested in forming a collaborative learning group, how do you do it and what are the mechanics of that group? And I don't know if we can get to the next slide. So most of you recognize that whether to form a collaborative learning group is a function of the material in which you're trying to learn. And so that's one of the first questions you should ask when you are forming a group. Is it appropriate to do so? I like to think that those classes that require a large amount of conceptual understanding or problem solving are the ones that lend themselves to collaborative group formation. You should also ask how frequently the group should meet and what you will do when you are part of these groups. Another thing that's very important in this time is how you can use technology for this group, whether that is in scheduling the group times or actually forming online group dynamics. I know many learning management systems now have areas in which people can form their own independent groups for those study-ins. And then you should think about how to set up these groups so that you are getting the most out of it and the group is getting the most out of your knowledge as well. So as we said earlier, the ideal group size is from 5 to 7 students. And you want to make sure that the group that you choose is one that can bring in different viewpoints and is not, is appropriate for your kind of place in the class. So you don't want to, for instance, be in a group of the people who are, you know, blowing out all the tests if you're struggling with the material, because that group dynamic won't be one that's beneficial for you. I like to say form a group with a couple of people who are a little bit better than you, a couple of people that are a little bit worse, and then everybody has something to contribute to the group dynamics. And you want to find a place, obviously, in which you can in which you can actually engage in the group activities. Next slide. So one of the most important things about forming these collaborative groups is to be deliberate in the process and to be intentional in the process. And so you want to have a well-defined time and meeting space, and you want to know what it is that you're doing and have an agenda for each of these meetings. It's a good idea to use a syllabus and to base it around your exam schedule. And as with any kind of study plan, you don't want to try to form a collaborative learning group and do the work, a day or two before the actual exam. So you want to give your self time to learn the material yourself and to be able to reap the learning benefits from the group for whatever the exam is. And you want to intentionally make sure that everybody in the group has a role to play and is contributing to the dynamics. Next slide. So again, in terms of intentionality, you do want some rules for the group in terms of how often you meet, how many people participate, and what the responsibility is for each person for each meeting. This is a way to ensure that the sessions are focused on learning and doesn't devolve into tangential experiences. Everybody in the group should be prepared to participate, meaning that they've done the reading ahead of time independently, and they have a section that they own, but are also prepared to contribute to all of the other sections. Everybody must be active in this and should participate fully in the entire discussion. There should also be a focus on staying on the task, and we'll see later that there are roles that are assigned to ensure that that happens. And in terms of forming the group, you don't necessarily want to do so based on friendships. And I actually encourage students not to do so in friendships. You really want to look at kind of where people are in learning the material and what they can contribute to your own learning and what you can contribute to other people's learning. And so the group dynamics is more important than the friendships. So there are a couple of different roles in this group. One is a coordinator who, books the rooms, sets the times, make sure everybody understands when and where the meeting's going to be. There's somebody who serves as the, the taskmaster or the monitor who makes sure that you stay on time and on topic. And then there's somebody who comes up with the material and what it is that, or the agenda for each of these group dynamics. And depending on how rigorous you want to be, you do want a commitment from everybody in the group. Now, whether you have something that is formal, written in terms of contract, you can do that, or you can have something that's verbal. The point is to make sure that everybody understands the purpose of these group meetings, which is to maximize your understanding of material and ideally, maximize the grade. And you have to stay focused on that end goal as you go through to dedicate the time and energy into forming these groups and making them successful. Next slide. So I think we had 80% who has participated in collaborative learning. I'd be interested to know how many people felt that it was successful and managed to maintain it long term. But we all know that there's some things that can happen to mess with the dynamics. And so these are some of the challenges that need to be overcome. And a lot of these you can do by being intentional and deliberate in the planning of the groups. So the scheduling conflicts, there are personality differences. Some people might be a toxic influence on the group or ends up dominating the conversation. People who come in not prepared to do the work. And who come for reasons besides maximizing the learning. And there are ways to mitigate all of those that I think we'll talk about after this session. So in the learning groups, there are several activities that you can do. We've listed about 10 of them. I'll go into a couple of them in detail, but all of these maximize engagement of the participants in the group and help with the learning outcomes. And so I'll talk about reciprocal teaching and the round robin approach, but all of these are effective depending on what the material is that you're trying to study and what your outcomes are. And so reciprocal teaching is what it sounds like. And this personally, I think is one of the best things that you can do in a group dynamic, which is that everybody takes a section of whatever particular unit it is that you're trying to learn. And one person is responsible for that section. They actually teach it to the rest of the group. The rest of the group ask questions and really queries the understanding of the presenter, and then they rotate on to the next section. And I will say, as a lecturer and as a professor, the act of teaching something forces you to actually learn it in a different way. And so the act of actually coming up with ways to explain it so that your audience can understand it makes you learn that material and understand the material. So I think it's a very effective method of learning there. Another method is the round robin method. And this one I think works a little bit better maybe for factual understanding or memorization. But here somebody throws out a question and then everybody in the group answers to give some information on that particular question or topic. And this is one of the round robin, is that you intentionally go through every person in the group so that they contribute to the response to that question. And this ensures that everybody participates in the learning experience.
Yeah, we have an opportunity for Q&A. In particular to focus on some of the challenges that you might have faced in the past with collaborative learning, as well as some of the platforms that you have used. I stopped my screen share too early, though. That question was supposed to be up on the screen, and I'm sorry about that. I'm old and I'm not great with digital tools. But I am going to share the list of platforms that you all suggested. It's a really long list, which is why it's wonderful. There were some things in there that I hadn't even heard of, but you all suggested using Microsoft Teams, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, Microsoft Word, particularly via Office 360, Zoom, Google Meet, GroupMe, WhatsApp, Google Drive, OneDrive, email, just multiple different clients, SharePoint, Slack, Moodle, Skype, Viber, and Dropbox. So there's a lot of really valuable tools out there. I think that one of the things that we were learning in terms of your suggestions, and one of the things that we've been emphasizing with each other, is that it's important to find the right tool for the right group, that there's no one size fits all. At this point, we want to take some questions. Some of you have already been sending a few. Keep them coming. I'm going to lead off with one, which is, and this is particularly important at certain institutions, and that is, if you try to start a group, how do you navigate that process when you're the only member of a group in the entire class?
Yeah, I'll take that one. That can be a challenge at times. You may be the only Black student, you may be the only woman, and you're trying to navigate that space on, who do I select to be a part of my group? Take a chance. If there's someone there that you've seen that may say, hey, how you doing? Walk up to that particular person and ask them, hey, do you want to be my group member? Do you want to be my partner in this particular project? Sometimes people just don't know how to approach people. So you can always take a chance and just go up to that particular person and ask. And that's what I've seen from students at work. If it doesn't work, then we'll have to go through another process. I mean, perhaps you have a friend who knows a friend that knows that particular person that can also help you to navigate that. So a part of it is just being approachable and approaching someone and trying it out to see if it works.
And to kind of piggyback off of Dr. Jackson, I think that it's also something to look at now that we're in this kind of virtual space that we're living in now, that again, just being able to reach out to people, whether that's if you find someone's email in a classroom that you all might be in, or if you participated in a Zoom meeting and you want to follow up with someone, just being able to reach out to people in digital spaces as well, because it looks a little different in a digital space when we have to send emails or we have to wait for a response, and it isn't that immediate response that we get when we meet with others. So again, don't be afraid to reach out to people, to send an email, to send an IM, or whatever the case may be, because some of the best collaborative learning and things that you get from this can come from those simple encounters.
It's a really difficult question to answer, and I thought that was really excellent information. Another question that we have is, how do you ensure equity in making sure that everyone's ideas are heard and considered?
So I think one of the maybe responsibilities of the coordinator is to look and see if, you know, conversations being dominated by one particular person, or there are people who aren't participating, and to maybe change the activities in order to drive that participation in other people. And so that's where, you know, it takes having a couple of people who take the responsibility of having a leadership role to say, hey, let's change this up a little bit so that we maximize the participation, or even to say, you know, let's hear from somebody else in this particular time.
And so I really like what you put up, Dr. Sharif, having the coordinator, the planner, and the monitor. I think that was excellent advice, because you need those three roles. I know, you know, if you're a type A personality, you may want to do all three roles, but it's good to have those individual roles, and you have that monitoring who is taking over the conversation and making sure there's equity. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think that organization early on can really help your group succeed, and having very clear responsibilities, goals, having some of those conversations early on when you're starting your group can really help some of those miscommunications later on.
In setting up those, this is a follow-on question from a student, in setting up those plans, how do you go through each student on the team and ask them to contribute to material when some students are a little more introverted or hesitant to contribute?
I think that that's the beauty of some of the different tools that are out there. So for instance, with Google Doc, it doesn't require you to actually be on a Zoom call. You can still contribute without having to say something or to come up with something on the spot. And so I like that there are different ways, and again, finding the way that works best with your group, that people can all get involved without necessarily having to be the leader or to speak out and things of that sort. So again, utilizing those tools and resources that are there for you, and understanding your strengths and the strengths and weaknesses of other people as well.
And I think this is where you know, being intentional in the formation of the group is really important. So you're forming this group with the intent that everybody participates, and so that is part of the process here.
Several students have asked a question about what to do when it's a real clash of personalities or sets of experiences or outlooks. I suppose, how do you navigate that situation?
So I'll start. I'll say first is to remember that this is not a friend group, right? And so this is really a group of people who, you know, have a collective goal of maximizing their grade. And so it isn't about developing friendships per se. And so understanding those, you know, personality differences, as long as you get to the goal, it might be okay. Now, if there's a particular toxic personality or something that destroys the group dynamic, then, you know, that again is where, you know, somebody taking leadership roles should really be active in mitigating that, and understanding that, you know, these are the ways in which groups dissolve, right? If and those sorts of things. Yeah.
And you know, it happens. It happens. You know, sometimes the group is there. There's a person or persons that may be too toxic, or you can't really see eye to eye, and you may have to move on to another group. So these things happen, but I think it is correct. You're trying to be there to maximize the benefits of getting to a common goal. So if you have that in your mind and you have those different leaders as a part of the group, you should be able to come out of it somewhat successfully.
And I'll just add one more thing. This kind of gets to one of the questions I see in the chat. This is where the group size, you know, dynamic plays a role. If you're too big, one, you have a more likelihood of a divergent personality, and you don't have contributions from everybody. If you're too small, you don't have sufficient diversity of thoughts and diversity of explanations to really wrap your mind around the material. And so there is a balance. Now, whether it's 5, whether it's 4, you know, I don't think it's a big deal, but there's a big difference between 5 and 12 in terms of the group.
So I've seen a couple of questions related to simply getting the group off the ground. So I'll pose 2 related ones. So 1, how do you reach out to other students? And 2, what do you do when you encounter, you say, hey, I want to start a peer learning group, I want to start a study group, but these other students aren't as familiar with the concept as you are?
So I think that one way, by using the different like learning systems like Canvas or Blackboard, you could send an email or a message there and ask, does anyone want to join a group? I think that right now we are in a very heavily digital environment, but you can email each other. You can send a, you know, a quick chat to someone on Zoom. I think there are a lot of ways, and just be proactive and try to reach out to people via different mediums.
And there could be some kind of natural pairings. I know in a lot of larger institutions, you know, if you have a large general biology class, there are small groups that are formed either with a TA or something like that. If you have a lab group, you know, that could be one where it's just 4 people or 6 people, and then that forms that group. So, you know, again, don't necessarily look for, you know, your friends or your buddies, but look for people who can help you accomplish your goals.
I think Dr. Jackson is having some trouble with her internet connection. I'll pose a related question, and this one has to do with pace. So a couple of students have asked, what do you do when there's a real difference in learning pace? And there's one student who learns somewhat slower, and that sort of slows down the overall rate at which the group can proceed, particularly if it's a study group.
So, you know, that is part of the dynamic of forming one, particularly in the beginning of a class. It serves no purpose for somebody who is struggling in a class to be in a group filled with people who are, you know, getting hundreds. It doesn't serve the people who are doing well, and it doesn't serve the person who is struggling. And I've seen that dynamic happen quite a bit. You know, somebody who's struggling will pick the person who's doing the best in the class and say, okay, I'm going to work with that person. And so everybody, and this again could be part of either the written agreement or the informal agreement, comes with the understanding that they are in a roughly the same place and that they are pulling each other up in that same one. And it could be that there is a better way for one particular person to learn in that group, and that maybe a different group is the way to go. And this is where you can mitigate some of this by being very clear in terms of the expectations up front before you start, and in terms of what the group is about and what it's for. And that's why having something formal in the beginning helps a month or two later.
Yeah, I think that again, having those clear roles set up at the beginning of that means that, you know, a coordinator might be more likely to be able to have a conversation with the person in the group that maybe and ask like, where are you stuck? How can we help you? Like, I think that as part of the group, you should try and help. And then I think that some of the other suggestions, people learn differently. So maybe there could be a different style or a different, you know, the round robin or reciprocal teaching, or at first trying to use some different strategies that might help the other students succeed. But I do also think that having, you know, an honest conversation about, you know, you want everyone in the group to get something out of it, and maybe that student isn't succeeding, and so maybe they would be better served in a different group.
Sorry guys, I got knocked off, but it seems like you guys kept it going. I've even forgotten what I was talking about, so fantastic.
Well, I'll pose the next question to you then. We've been talking about the roles for the groups. How do you go about deciding who would be best suited for which role?
You know, I think that's a conversation for the group. And you can also talk about personalities, you know, so you guys can pull a list together on, you know, who likes to coordinate. Some people like to coordinate, who likes to monitor. So I think it just depends on, you know, what someone can do successfully in the group. So for me, I would always say that I like to plan, you know, and then some people just might like to monitor. So yeah, so they would have to go and work with each other in terms of personality.
And I'll say, Dr. Jackson alluded to this in her talk, but you know, these skills that you're developing here are things that'll serve you for the rest of your career. I mean, having an effective meeting, Lord knows, is one of the linchpins of being able to get things done in any type of career, right? And this is pretty much what these sorts of things are. So learning these skills now will only serve you later on.
Yeah, I think that it's just taking a minute to reflect on your personality, the things that you have already noticed that you are good at. You probably know whether you are good at planning and good at scheduling. And so, you know, take a minute, reflect, then share that with the group. But I really do want to highlight that like the way that academia is moving more and more, it's collaborative. And we see that in publications, and we see that in the different ways that professors interact. And so these are skills that are really good to learn now, because it will also tell you, you know, what you are bringing to a group and where you could perhaps, you know, improve later on as you are a graduate student or a postdoc. And I agree that being able to have an efficient meeting will, you know, those are skills that will only do you well.
We just got two very similar questions. What if multiple people want to be the leader?
I mean, you know, I think it's about the word, because sometimes if you say you're leader 1, you're leader 2, you're leader 3, but you have these particular duties, everyone's a leader. So I think we need to get away from the word, just know that everyone has a leadership role in the group, and they're going to have to come together and work together and work with whatever role we've assigned you to do. You are part of the leadership team. So I don't see too many groups anymore where there's just one leader. It's actually a leadership team, and people are working together to solve a problem. So I'm going to give you an example that happened this morning. 9 of us did a collaborative manuscript. But, you know, 4 of us served in leadership positions. We all had a role to get the manuscript out, to write something, but 9 people, but 4 were the leaders of the group. And and we had to do it in 5 weeks. So it can get done. I think people just need to understand what is their role and know that everyone is a leader in the group.
And I think it's also very important when working in groups to always remember the goal at hand. I think that a lot of times it's easy to get distracted from what the actual purpose and goal of the collaborative learning group is. And so always, whenever you find issues in working in a group, go back to that goal or go back to that purpose of the group and see what it is that you can contribute in order to get to that point. So I think that that's, something important to look at whenever adversity comes up in a particular group as well.
And there should be some assessment throughout the semester or quarter or whatever about whether the group dynamics are actually working. Are you all learning? Are you making satisfactory progress? And, I don't, leader might be a charged word. I think, you need somebody who books the rooms, sends out the emails, right? But for any given session, it could be that one person takes the lead on chapter 2 and somebody else takes the lead on chapter 3 the next week or whatever. So the individual roles might rotate depending on the units and what the schedule is set in the beginning.
So significant number of questions. Probably the most common question is, what do you do about that person who isn't really contributing the per expectations? So I want to pose that question, but I also want to ask, because there are a lot of different reasons why somebody may not be contributing, and many of the questions highlighted those different reasons. Our students are wise beyond their years. It could be that somebody's feeling disheartened by a bad exam. It could be that somebody is really just free riding. It could be that somebody is it's slow on the material. It could be that somebody's having a personal conflict with another one of the members. It could be miscommunication. So I guess the second question is, how do you identify what's going on with that member of your group and reach out to them?
So there's a lot there, right? And so as a group dynamic, there are going to be differences. I will say this, if you're somebody who kind of feels like you have mastery of the material and all you're doing is kind of bringing everybody up to speed, that is not a bad thing, because that act of teaching actually reinforces the knowledge within yourself. If you are somebody, or there is somebody who is trying but simply doesn't get the material, then that also tells you something, right? If the rest of the group has learned the material and you're not there, that means that you might have to put in a little bit of extra work, either one-on-one tutorials, going to the professor, maybe pulling one of the members aside and say, hey, can you help me get up to speed? And so within this, there should be some self-reflection in terms of how you're working within the group. Now, if you have somebody who just refuses to do the work, or was assigned a particular topic and was unprepared for that topic, well, that needs to be a conversation, because that affects the entire group dynamic. And if you are intentional about what the expectations are in the beginning, you can say, hey, these expectations aren't being met. And there was a question I saw about learning disabilities and how that works with the group dynamic, and that's a really difficult question, but that's one in which there should be some recognition of what you contribute and then what your needs are, and so that can be clear in the beginning, so that the group can work within that dynamic.
I wanted to jump in about, if you just have that person that's not working out for you, it's going to have to take one person in the group to actually have a conversation, if not all of you in the group to have a conversation. Give them a chance. It could be something personal that's going on, but once you've given them a chance and they explain and they're not going to work, then you may have to bring in a mediator. Sometimes I've had, because a lot of my classes have group settings or cooperative learning groups. And so they may come and say, hey, it's just not working out. And sometimes I've served as that mediator. And usually what is happen in a few cases. Things have happened personally and the student just cannot catch up. And they just need a little bit of time and they're falling behind. And once we have that conversation, usually things get a little bit better with the group dynamics. And in other situations, it's a toxic situation and we may have to remove that member and they go to another group. So yeah, it just depends. And yeah, there was a lot to that question. So thank you.
Yeah, I know that there was a lot to that question, but I wanted to follow up on something. I think it is important when you're in these groups to really, ask yourself whether it is working for you. Before starting this, I was talking about how in graduate school, I was in a course working on problem sets, and I was the only woman in the group. And no one believed that I was right. And it really made me second guess myself. And, you're in grad school, it was a small group. There were only 7 of us. And so I felt, leaving, I'm going to be left out. But you have to, what is best for you? And it wasn't working for me, and it wasn't a good environment, and it wasn't helping me learn and succeed in the course. And so you'll have many opportunities to be in groups, and you just have to reflect on what it is, whether this group is helping you.
So last question, and then we'll jump into some review. We've talked a lot about setting the ground rules at the beginning. Everybody coming in and starting the group with a common purpose. Sort of a 2-part question. How do you bring on a new member midway, for example, through the project or the semester? And what advice do you have for somebody who's coming on as that new member?
Yeah, I think that having, again, someone in the role to welcome and give them, part of these are the ground rules. And I think that, again, that highlights why it's important to be organized, because if things don't work out mid-semester and you have different, some people leaving and some people joining, then having a clear organization and roles and expectations and what each person is responsible for, and finding ways to include that person and think of ways that they can contribute. And I think that in one of those preliminary conversations, it's important to ask people, how do they learn best, what strategies, so that you can really set the group up to succeed. And so Dr. Sharif shared a number of strategies that can be used. So yeah.
And I think too, if you are the person who's coming into the group midway, I think it's a great practice to, just try to learn as much as you can, because you are coming in kind of at a disadvantage because you haven't started the group with everyone, but that's okay, because by talking to people, getting familiar with the group and things, you can learn those things. So it's okay to not be super versed in everything that's going on. Understand that you're coming in midway through and try to learn the dynamic. And if there's things that you feel like might help that dynamic more, contribute those things, and just be open-minded to how things are running and what you can actually do to get to the ultimate goal of the group.
Yeah, you can ask for some of the documents that have been prepared, so that you can see how the group has been working, and you can have access to some of the materials that have been discussed and prepared.
And I think it just comes with patience also, because I know for myself, I've been in groups where I've kind of been thrown in halfway, and I often get, down on myself. I don't know all these things, or I don't know where to go for this. And it's okay to ask questions. People are in the group clearly for a purpose. And so if the main goal is to achieve X, Y, Z, then, it's okay to go back and ask, well, what was A, B, and C? So, just being open with people and communicating what is needed in order to make the group work.
Thanks, Dr. Rie. In the last few minutes, I'm going to share the PowerPoint again and hand the floor to you to talk through some reasons why students might resist working in a collaborative learning, if you're not already convinced, and then help us consolidate some of the knowledge with a review.
Okay, and so I think that this Q&A that we did was actually perfect to kind of segue into the last few slides that we have here. So a lot of times, and this is something that I often hear, is a lot of people say that they don't like working in groups. I'd rather just get it done myself. I know my schedule and how I work through things, and a lot of times people just despise working in groups because of experiences that they've had prior to. But from what my colleagues have presented to you all and what we've learned from experience is that working in groups does have its benefits, but it doesn't go to say that while working in groups, there won't be some resistance. And so one of the things that I also saw in the chat was a lot of people mentioned about certain meeting times not being convenient or not fitting in our schedule. And I think that, again, going back to a point that was made previously, that's the beauty of being in a virtual world that we're living in now, that even though everyone's schedule might not align properly, there's different tools and resources that are available to us so that we can still contribute, even if there might be a discrepancy in a meeting time, or if something else comes up and everyone isn't able to get together at the same time. So again, if you feel as though someone in your group may be being resistant to actually working in the group, try to facilitate things within the group that would allow for diverse forms of communication. So one thing that I dealt with this past semester while we were transitioning to online learning is that a lot of my students, whenever we would have class on Zoom, they would not show their cameras. And so that was kind of one of the things that I'm used to seeing my students every day in class. And so getting on Zoom and not being able to see them was one of the things that I kind of had to work through. And so a way that I worked through that was kind of meeting them where they were and assigning different projects and things where they were kind of forced to work with each other. So they did use things like GroupMe and Google Docs and things of that sort. So just being creative with that and understanding that resistance in working groups is going to happen. It's not always, a negative thing. Sometimes things just come up and things happen, and that there is that resistance, but there are ways to go around it. Next slide, please. Alrighty, and so again, going back to the comment that is often said about not wanting to work in groups because of previous group experiences, if you've had a bad experience working in a group before, understand that that experience is mutually related to that particular experience, and it isn't going to be your experience every time that you work in groups. So I would recommend being just open to different people and understanding that just because you may have had one bad experience working in a group, or a group didn't go as planned, that isn't to say that all groups work in that way. So again, just trying to find different ways to combine groups that are beneficial. So that might mean reaching out to someone who might have a strength in a certain area, or in a group facilitating some kind of discussion or things of that part. So I just think that always going back and looking within yourself and seeing what you can do to avoid some of the resistance or behaviors that might result in working groups. And so just to kind of summarize, so collaborative learning is one of those things that I don't think that we can ever get away with. As we can see the way that the world is going, group work is here to stay. And I think that with learning how to actually work in a collaborative group setting, it's great, but also being able to expect some of the challenges or some of the resistance that might come in a result of working in a group, and being able to flip those things so that you're maximizing the benefits of actually working in a group. And so these are just kind of questions that you can ask yourself. So how is this working in this group increasing my knowledge, or what am I gaining from working in this group? How is this particular group structured? Is there a different structure that maybe we can use in order to support the goal and achieve what is required from our particular group? Or what challenges can I expect going into a group? I think knowing these things on the front end and being aware of them helps to make great groups, and helps to hone in what that final goal is as to what we're trying to get done in our collaborative group. And so I think it also, before we wrap up, I just wanted to say that it was very interesting presenting this to you all today, because while we're presenting collaborative learning to you all, we also had to be a part of a collaborative group in order to organize all of this. And so know that experience is your greatest teacher, and be open to joining groups and being a part of groups, because in the end, it only is there to support you, but you have to be willing to put in the work and to get and reap the benefits of your collaborative learning experience as well. So I think that that kind of wraps up, and thank you guys so much for all of the questions that you asked. I think that that helped to facilitate a great discussion. I hope that you all were able to get some gems out of this presentation that we had for you today.
Thanks, Dr. Rie. I know that they won't hear it, but please give a round of applause to Drs. Rie, Flores, Jackson, and Sharif. They're phenomenal as collaborators. Every time I have seen them present some of this material, I've learned something new. I hope you did as well. I apologize if we didn't get to your question. They were really phenomenal questions. Reach out to one of us if you want more guidance on anything. Reach out to anybody in the classroom. We want you to use this tool. We want to support you in using this tool. So feel free to call on us as a resource. And with that, I think I wish you the best of the rest of the day.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here with all of you, and feel free to email us if we did not get to your question.
Yeah, there were some phenomenal questions. And it was great to see 300 people participating. I hope you guys are having a great summer in this COVID environment.
It was great, guys. And again, reach out if you need us.